Call this meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody here on this beautiful, beautiful day. It makes you feel better when you start having nice weather, doesn't it? Are there any questions on the agenda? All right, now I'm sure there's some questions on the consent agenda, so. Doris.
Help educate me. What is a Medilab school system and what's an EdPAC unit?
Gary, tell him about the EdPAC unit first.
Those are the units that we use for heating and cooling in the classrooms that go through the wall.
Okay.
And in capital improvements this year, we had Laverne and Oakland and Riverdale. We're hoping to cover all of those. So there'll be 2 more of these coming through. And as far as MIDI, that's an instrument that uses an international code so that you can use it in recording or whatever that goes in these windows.
One of these big deck
Keyboard.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, we talked about them before and I didn't know what they were. And then the EdPACs, those are just, we've got a lot of schools with those units and the individual classroom heating and cooling.
Now, what does the international code do? I mean, music is just one language. It's not multi-languages of music.
For instance, this keyboard has a code in that the sound can be changed to a guitar, to a trumpet.
Okay,
All
okay.
those kinds of things, and there's
Gotcha.
all the things that have a MIDI language programmed into them can understand that, so you can record and transfer.
Okay. Any other questions on that now that we've been educated? All right, any other questions on the agenda, consent agenda?
Rick?
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, we've gotten, several of us have gotten phone calls about the volunteer coach at Thurman Francis. I think it's worthy or behooves us to have some little bit of discussion because I've gotten 3 phone calls, 3 people who have a concern. I've gotten no calls from people who are approving this or in recommendation of it. I know our administrator favors this, or she would not have recommended the fellow for this position, but it's unusual. In my 8-year tenure, we've not had anyone to call about a volunteer coach. Now, volunteers, to me, create more exposure from the liability issue standpoint than someone who is a staff person. So that's why I'm bringing it up. Parents, there's a group of parents who are concerned. I'm sure there are a group of parents who would be in equal support, and I know my administrator is in support of this person. So I guess it's something that we as a board ought to bounce around.
Yeah, I suspect so. First of all, one of the board members called me last night and I asked Ms. Barnes, she and I met this morning. I met with Ms. McLeod. We called the principal. First of all, this gentleman has been the volunteer coach there the past 2 years. It's not his first year. Secondly, Ms. Barnes reported back to me, and then I took the time to call the principal myself. And she said that he has a lot of support down there, and he has a few clearly that don't, at least 3 or 4 that don't support him as well. It's been my experience, with all due respect to those folks. People sometimes do network and they do make a little noise when they don't want somebody to have a position. But at the end of the day, the principal had vetted the guy. He doesn't, have any kind of criminal record. He doesn't have anything from our perspective that would prohibit him from being the volunteer coach. And she says he's done an outstanding job the past 2 years, and she didn't see the reason why he shouldn't be there the 3rd year. But again, clearly there are 3 or 4 people who would prefer that he not be there. She's not one of them. I personally thought, I took her at face value that there was ample support for him to be the coach. and that she's the principal, and that I personally thought I should support this gentleman being the coach.
More discussion.
I think Doris brings up a good point, is that I've been sitting either out in the audience or behind this desk for over 6 years, and this is the first time that I remember, you know, a group of parents coming out against the use of a particular volunteer coach, and I'm concerned also, and you know, it's certainly an uncomfortable position to be in, and but I certainly want to give due diligence, you know, to parents that are calling.
Well, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you raise a valid point. Of course, one could argue that Gary Rankin won 5 state championships at Riverdale, and a lot of people didn't always like him and would have preferred someone else come in and coach the team. Again, I'll go back to what I said. The principal's vetted the guy. He hasn't done anything criminal. He may not be popular with 3 or 4 parents, but the principal thinks he should be the man. And also, there's ample support for the guy to be the man. So I'm going to recommend that we honor the principal's request.
If between now and Thursday, a lot more parents call us, would you probably change your mind if that was to occur? I mean, I'm just
Well, I
wondering.
think that you'll probably.
We could get on the phone and call a bunch of them and have them call us, I guess.
I mean,
Doris, did you have something else to say on that? Donald?
As the principal makes the recommendation here, and the principal made the recommendation, I'd say, based upon whomever the coach of that sport is at the school for the, but I do have a concern. I received some calls, and this is unusual. Most of the time that just goes under the radar screen, but if, you know, they go through the same checks that a certified or a classified person does?
we fingerprint them, do criminal background, yes. And maybe the difference in this case is, he is actually the coach, the soccer coach. You know, more often than not, you know, some of these minor sports, we don't have any supplemented coaches and all. So this guy's actually been the coach the past 2 years. This will be his 3rd year as the coach. Like, for example, high school football, they have a much minor role in coaching. So that said, he would be, or she would be more inclined to generate comments from parents and stuff like that, than maybe just your typical volunteer coach.
I think some of this goes back to problems that he may have had in the Smyrna Soccer League that people didn't, they thought he put too much emphasis on winning or whatever. And I mean, I've heard several people on both sides of this. So, but anyway, I thought I'd just bring that up. Go ahead, Doris. Oh, I thought you had another thing. Grant?
Mr. Chairman, I have several calls, and but one of the things that they said, the individual, was in fact that he was dismissed from a team. Now, again, I have no way of, you know, up to this point to have been able to check it out, but said he was actually dismissed or fired from a like position. Again, that's something that we need to, if in fact there is something there, we need to check into that. And it was some other areas that might make you feel a little uncomfortable. So, you know, I'm just open for anything that might come in on it.
Mark, do you have anything you want to add to this?
I'm always troubled going based on hearsay. But this is not unusual, it's unique. You know, as others have said, I've never gotten a single call on a volunteer coach. So I'm troubled. I don't know that we have all the information we need at this moment to say for sure. I'm struggling with a little bit. We're not talking about someone, I know it would be upsetting, imagine it would be upsetting for this person if we said no, but we're not talking about somebody's livelihood here, as opposed to if it were a teacher or a classified employee. You weigh that against the potential that some of these comments have been accurate. Well, how do you come down on that? That's where I am.
What concerns me is, once again, we might be getting into an area where we're delving into something that, you know, that we don't trust our principal, or we don't trust the director of schools, or the vetting process, or, and I'm sure Paula's been through this issue, investigating this, and Angel's probably been through this, investigating this, and they seem to think it's okay. So we don't even know the guy, but yet we're going to say no because some parent is upset about it. I mean, parents can get up, you know, I'm sure when I was a principal, there was a lot of parents that would have liked seen me go. I won't say a lot, but there was some. But I'm just saying, you know, Mr. Gill was coach for a long time, and I'm sure you can go to Smyrna and find a lot of people that, well, not a lot, Mr. Gill, but some people that say, you know, he should have never coached. So, I don't know. I just...
Well, the thing, I mean, if somebody's out there watching this and they're a supporter of this guy, I mean, are we going to base our decisions on the fact that he's got 55 or 60% of the people supporting him versus 40% that don't? Again, it goes back to the protocol is we do a background check, we do various searches, we fingerprint, the principal vets the guy. He's been there 2 years. And I mean, I think we're treading in a dangerous direction when we start intervening because we get 3 or 4 phone calls from parents because they don't necessarily approve of the coach. I go back to what I said about ranking. You can go across the best coaches that have been in this county, many of whom didn't make everybody happy. They drove their kids hard, they pushed them hard, they're competitive, and when you do that, I can assure you that you trample on a few toes along the way. I think we're going the wrong direction, given that we've done these various checks. The principal's vetted the guy. She's recommended him. You know, are we going to do this every time we get 3 or 4 phone calls? What scares me, and I know it's kind of unprecedented that you got these calls, but I just don't think that's the way we need to be doing business personally.
We have had phone calls before on these, but normally they have been taken off the list before it ever got this far, because somebody would say something and that would be checked and they'd say, yeah, this is correct, and we take them off. But Mark, and then Terry.
Terry's next.
Go ahead, Terry. It's fine.
I was just going to make a comment. I'm not going to mention the school, but probably 2 or 3 years ago, we run across the same deal with one of the middle schools. Basically, I'll say it's a baseball program also, but I guess what concerns me are we, every time we get complaints, what are we going to do about a coach? I'm talking about one of our certified employees that's actually coach of the sport. What are we going to do every time we get complaints on them? I mean, you're going to investigate them just like this, or? I mean, that's...
Terry, the difference is we're not asked to approve those folks every year. This is now on our agenda. We're being asked to make a judgment. And I don't disagree with anything that Rick or Harry just said, or you. But are we just going to rubber stamp everything that comes before us, or are we going to make a judgment?
I don't think rubber stamp.
I don't think rubber stamp.
Well,
We're just talking about
we
it.
can never question.
Nobody said not to question it. When I hadn't said not to question it.
Okay, well, but you have said we shouldn't go against it.
Well,
And I'm not even talking about this case. I'm just talking about the principle of what our roles should be here as a board. And I don't want to get into all this personnel stuff. It'd be fine with me if this didn't come to us, but it's here. And are we going to?
Well, that said, though, how do you conclude whether you should or shouldn't vote on the guy?
I said I was struggling, and that's what I'm struggling
Yeah.
about. I mean,
There
I
has
guess
to
to me,
be,
the
yeah.
fact is we've gotten calls this time, and I've anyway never gotten calls in the past. That's what's got my attention.
But some of the best teachers, for example, I guarantee it helped with Mr. Jernigan, Mr. Wise, and Mr. Odom. some of the best teachers you'd ever have in a school. You have a parent or two get mad at them, they call 2 or 3 other parents. First thing you know, you got 4 or 5 parents call you a Mrs. So-and-so, not a good teacher. You know what they did in that classroom today? You ever had that happen, Don? And we knew how solid these people were. And I hope that's not the case here, but I suspect that's what part of it is. And I think our responsibility, and I see your point too, Mark. I mean, you know, you guys are in a position to vote this in. You don't typically deal with personnel issues. But again, it goes back to the principals vetted the guy and recommended him. And I mean, I hope you'll approve it, but if you don't, we'll go a different direction.
A little bit hesitant to say too much on this. I don't know the gentleman at all. I can't even pronounce his last name. It's probably most of y'all cannot. But the bottom line is, when I get a call from an individual who is advised that there's 3 or 4 other folks that were witness to some actions, and that this person had been dismissed from a team as a coach, then I can't just ignore that. And without going into a lot of detail for fear that I might misrepresent, the allegation is a little bit more than just somebody doesn't like him. It's an attitude that he had and some actions that were taken on a previous trip that he was supervising. So I just can't ignore it. So I just I don't know if we need to somehow look into those allegations of.
Paul, Ms. Barnes has looked into it. Do you know the particulars on that? Do you mind speaking to that?
I did talk to Dr. Helton this morning, and first of all, she said that she was aware of the concerns of some parents, and she made phone calls to many parents on the team, and the majority of parents did support him returning as a volunteer coach. And he is the skilled coach, if you will. Mr. Gill mentioned he's the head coach. He's the one with the skills. They do have a teacher that also serves as coach to be there with him at all times. So he has a school board member there with him. Evidently, he was in Smyrna with the Smyrna League, and his philosophy is to be competitive in the sport. And he said in Smyrna, they tend to let all the players join the team and try to give everyone equal playing time. His philosophy is different than that, and he's competitive. He wants the best players to play. They play to win. And that's the same philosophy he has with the Thurman Francis team. And they've had an extremely successful 2 seasons as a result of that. I think, according to Dr. Helton, that's kind of where there was some separation. And this gentleman did leave that league with his child and go to a different league, went to a neighboring county and played. Several other parents followed him, which caused some dissension, and the board, they didn't dismiss him. He was the tournament director there, so they removed him from being the tournament director for the Smyrna League. So it was little scenarios like that. I also spoke with him. He was in California with his work-related conference, and talked very highly about the program and all the things they've accomplished.
Terry, you got anything to say?
No, that was gonna be my question, just Ms. Barnes, Mr. McLeod investigate it and come back with a decent report. And, yeah, I still think we're getting into, I'd like to say, caution which way you go on this, because I can see a whole lot of other situations out there. May not strictly be just a volunteer coach, but I see other avenues you can go down and run in this same type scenario, and first thing you know, we're up here judging everybody. That's just me.
Which, when you can get that.
No, I agree. I mean, he's making a good point.
But I guess the board will just decide whether they want to pull this off the agenda Thursday night or not. I mean,
Well, I don't even know if that's an option when they start soccer.
This is for 2010-11.
Okay. Okay. They're getting their paperwork in early.
Of course, I have reservations about, what you hear, but it kind of comes down to if the principal's willing to take the heat, let them take it.
Well, not to cut in on you, Donald, but I think not only the principal, but you're talking about Mr. Gill here. If he's willing to take the heat,
Well,
same deal.
the principal is the one that's down there with those parents every day, and if she's made the call, I might not like him as a coach, but if she does, then that's kind of where the buck stops. And
Well, I'm sure if he was that much of a problem, she would be glad to get rid of him. That would be my good thing.
well, I didn't know that he had already been coaching down there a couple of years till now. So he's undoubtedly she has bought into his philosophy. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
That kind of changes. Man.
Certainly, because of the way things are set up, Mr. Gill is basically the CEO overall of the employees of the system. The difference here is that this is a volunteer. There's more weight on the board in this instance than it would be in something involved unless, it became a statutory step to the board. So, as long as we do our due diligence and look at every aspect and listen to what Mr. Gill has said and what Ms. Barnes, I still have concerns. I've gotten calls from people I know, people that I respect, and it's troublesome for me.
Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, what I'm going to do is call the individuals that left messages and the ones I've talked with and to try to get maybe some clarification. But it just hit me broadside. I didn't have any background, never heard of the guy, didn't know he was already a coach. But there was a couple of things that concerned me. Maybe I didn't get the information correctly, or maybe it was exaggerated. But I'm going to try to find out because the charges that they made are of concern to me for anybody that would be around children. So I will check into that further and see what has to happen between now and Thursday night.
Any other discussion?
Six.
Six.
We'll have a recognition of Siegel High School's JROTC National Championship Precision Air Rifle Marksmanship Team. Marksmanship team, pardon me. We also,
Is this not the second time for them?
I think so.
I don't know, is it? I may
They've
know.
been, I think
We've had
they've
two rifle teams that have done extremely well.
I think they've been state champion. I don't know if they've ever been national champion, but it's a pretty big deal.
And we also have a spotlight tomorrow night. Are you smarter than a fifth grader? Ann McCraw and Mr. Odom will review changes, enhancements, and protocols for the 2010 TCAP test with the summarization of Rutherford County's most recent ACT Explorer scores.
Do we have to answer any questions?
No, heck no, we've already straightened that out.
Okay.
Okay, number 9.
Mr. Clardy will have multiple updates on the many projects that are taking place in the Rutherford County schools.
You can do that tomorrow, right?
Yes, sir.
That means we don't have to listen to him twice. He's done a lot of work. 10.
Textbook adoption report ed 5099 and textbook certificate of adoption report ED 2153. School systems are required to submit textbook adoptions annually on forms provided by the Tennessee Department of Education. The local textbook adoption report shows newly adopted textbook for 2010. Textbook adoption includes K-12 English grammar and composition, foreign world language, and English as a second language. All textbooks are on a 6-year cycle, and we're going to recommend that you approve the textbook adoption report and the certificate of adoption report as presented.
Darn.
This is not involved in, these textbooks are not involved with those that are in question coming out of Texas, are there?
No, I wouldn't think so. I mean,
These are, I don't know if you've read an
I have
article
actually seen it, yeah.
that got my attention when I read that article, and it created a controversy, but I don't know enough about it to.
Well, Don, I know you've worked textbook.
Were they science or something?
Science or math?
You know, this is Tennessee's for English, grammar, and composition, foreign language.
But how were these, I mean, we have a representative on the state committee, don't we? Textbook.
Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Somebody has to apply to the state, take all these vendors, and they have a process of people that review them, and then they'll produce a list. And you remember, we did actually a press spotlight review. We sat down and looked at the state standards and then do an alignment about which textbook contains the majority of the state standards. You've got teachers from every school, pretty much there. Doesn't mean you necessarily will buy them, but each year, whenever the 6-year cycle rolls around, the form comes out for you to decide if you're gonna buy English textbooks, which one of these state you need to do. And it's a benefit to us generally to take on the state sanctioned books because we get state textbook funds, than to go off. Now, sometimes there's not a book for some subjects, but you try to stay with basically whatever the state, one of those approved by the state, so you can use state textbook funds.
Any other questions?
Sir?
Yes, sir.
And this is a budget question, not a text. What percentage of the state, when you buy from the state list, what percentage does the state reimburse the counties or the system for textbooks?
But in a case of an adoption, like if we adopted these books, English books, isn't it a couple $1 million, isn't that what we're talking about?
Yes, sir.
Out of local money?
Well,
So, I mean, out of
out of our GP budget.
Out of our GP budget, yeah. So it's conceivable, for example, in a case like this, we talked about this today, that there could be such a budgetary hardship, even though you adopt, which you have to do, you may not be able to purchase, which may be our case, may not be our case. But like, for example, we talked this morning, Mr. Sandvig and I, same holds true for next year. There's a math adoption year. And, you know, you're talking about another $2 or $3 million. And it's almost likely next year we may not be able to adopt those math textbooks simply, I mean, we'll be able to adopt them, but we may not purchase them simply because of financial restraints. But anyway, we'll talk more about that here next week.
Okay, facilities.
Facilities, Eagleville baseball field irrigation and backstop improvements. Principal Holton of Eagleville High School has requested permission to upgrade the backstop, improve drainage, install irrigation, and sod the baseball field at Eagleville School. The improvements will be funded through private donations and funds raised by the Eagleville Baseball Support Organization program at no cost to Rutherford County School Board. I recommend that we approve improvements to Eagleville High School baseball field as requested at no cost to the board.
Questions?
Just an observation, Rick, in our tenure on the board, several really good things have happened at Eagleville. I think about their football field, track field, or track that's around the football field, these improvements here, things that are in the mill that are taking place for Eagleville High School and that whole campus. It's great.
I think it was great that they had students out there laying the turf on their football field.
Yes, sir.
Remember that?
Yes,
I don't
I
know
do.
that everybody remembers that, but they had students out there laying the turf out there. So that was, you know, when you do something and you become a part of it, you respect it, I think.
The community is bought into their school.
Yes.
The bypass also opened up some land for some overflow parking near the gym and another practice field. So what was kind of a knoll that really couldn't be used for anything is now turned into some very useful property. I think Mr. Clardy worked out a deal for them to take some rock from that and to level that, and you can now use it for various activities, especially for parking, because they don't have a lot.
Anything else? Any other comment? Okay, number 12, Mr. Gill.
contract for substitute teacher services. The request for proposal for substitute teacher services was released to vendors on February the 2nd, 2010, with a submission deadline on March 9, 2010. 5 proposals were received. 3 companies with comparable rates whose proposals met the terms of the RFP were selected to present to the selection committee on April 6, 2010. Based on the proposal rates and previous experience, the committee recommends that the 2010-2011 contract for substitute teachers services be awarded to Advantage XPO, formerly Holland Employment. The members of the committee feel very strongly that although Holland did not present the lowest rate, the level of service Holland has provided in the previous years far exceeds the benefits of changing to another company. And we're recommended that you approve 2010-2011 contract for providing substitute teacher services to Advantage XPO. And I think the difference, it was a $3,000 difference, and we're talking about over how many, what's the total bid on it? 2.2 million. 2.2 million. There was $3,000 difference. One, which was, as we say there, the quality of service we've gotten from them has been outstanding. We feel like they probably, from our perspective, could provide substitutes at a better fill rate, and we feel strongly that we've got to go that direction.
Questions?
Rick, you'll recall someone who worked with Holland coming in and lobbying us for a pay raise. Right. It didn't work for us, but so we couldn't do anything about that. Are we still satisfied with the rate of pay for substitute teachers?
I think all of us like to pay them more, but I don't think we're in a position to do it. I think that's the bottom line. Also, I just want Mr. Donald Jernigan to know we're ready for any questions he might have about it.
He will have some, I think.
Ms. Barnes reminded me that one of my favorite subjects is on the agenda.
Well, I reminded her.
Oh, okay. Well, I do have a question. The daily rate, looking at this to the company formerly Holland, where do I see that? I see the current, where's the daily rate that we pay them on our chart? Which?
The subs, I don't have that on the chart.
It's not on the chart, but I have it.
So it's not on the chart.
I will tell you why she's scurrying through there. It's $50,000 less than last year's administrative fees.
We pay $65 for a degree and a teaching license, $60 with a degree, $57.50 without a degree, and $54.40 for those that work in a special ed position. Yes.
If we looked at the markup, the percentage of markup on this,
We looked at the differences in the payroll taxes, benefits, unemployment, administrative fee. The different firms presented those very differently. So it really kind of came down to just looking at the total cost for the benefits and the administrative cost. One of the differentiating factors for us at the presentation was that Advantage XPO had, one of the points they made, we had trouble filling special ed positions. They had had some additional training to get more of the subs comfortable filling special ed positions. That they had taken the initiative on some areas like that, which we think helped the fill rate, it made a big difference to us.
well, and I would agree, the fill rate is extremely important, especially to the people that are in the school building itself. So That's a very important topic. I just never have accepted the fact that we're paying them for something that we're already doing with 2,800 people. And when we talk about saving money, this is one of the categories that I've always looked at as a possibility. But it has been pointed out to me and more than once that when you do a lot of the things that they do, the savings might be a little hard to capture. So, I guess at this late date, Mr. Gill, once again, I will concede this might be the way to go.
Mark?
This is a slightly different question, and really, it's not about these proposals. I had a lady who had worked for a long time, I guess, as a sub in our system, and without going into all the details, I asked Mr. Gill and Ms. Barnes to check into it, and she got into trouble for doing something that our teachers do in terms of classroom management. And the bottom line was we had no control over the punishment, or little control over her punishment, because she was not our employee. Holland got to determine, she violated Holland's rules, not our rules. And therefore, we had no say. And again, I don't want the board to get into that, but I assume that, Mr. Gill, you're comfortable with that? I mean, these people are working in our schools, and yet our control over them seems somewhat limited because they're not actually our employees.
I think I remember the situation you're talking about. We have occasions when Ms. Barnes will have to call them, and they're pretty open-minded with respect to our input on those kind of deals. In this particular case, I think it was, from their perspective, pretty clear that the consequence for doing that was appropriate, don't you? But I mean, I don't think we're fully removed from having input, but you're right in how you explained it.
Well, it's not even so much about that individual case as the principle of who's controlling these employees. And yeah, we have influence, but if Holland wants to fire them, they get to fire them, right? I mean, isn't that the bottom line?
You want to comment on that, Paula?
With respect to Holland, I mean, they certainly are a Holland employee, not our employee.
Right.
And they've trained their substitutes to follow certain guidelines and protocols.
Right.
But they're always very receptive to us contacting them, and if we have an issue, we can discuss it and reach an agreement. If they feel like that's in support of what they need to do at their division, they'll work with us on that. And in this particular case, they're willing to make some concession and make some changes in the employment for that particular person, just not at one site, but allow her to go to other sites.
Right, and I'm really not arguing that, but, well, I just think that's something to ponder. I mean, we've given up some control over the people who are working in our buildings. And
That's a good point. Maybe it's something we need to sit down and talk to them and have at least some kind of, do we have a written agreement on, how they could supplant us or supersede what we do, or is that something? Yeah.
it just seems like they had a more restrictive rule than we did, and the sub was held to that rule and not our rule.
If, excuse me, if a sub is determined by the lead administrator that they're just not very good, they're incapable of classroom management, can the administrator say, do not send that sub to this campus again? Okay, and can Mr. Gill say, I do not want this sub in any of our schools?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, 13. Tenure for certified employees. Tenure with the Rutherford County School System is awarded to certified teachers who meet the following criteria. First, have a degree from an approved four-year college or to any vocational teacher who has the equivalent amount of training established and licensed of the State Board of Education. Next, holds a valid professional license based on training covering the subjects or grades taught. Next, has completed a probationary period of 3 school years or not less than 27 months within the last 5-year period, the last to be employed as a regular teacher. Next, is reemployed by the Board of Education for service after the probationary period. And we're going to recommend that you approve the list of teachers as presented for tenure with the Rutherford County School System.
Questions?
Calendar for 2011-2012. Calendar Committee met on March the 10th, 2010, developed and recommended a 2011-2012 school system instructional calendar. Recommend that you approve the recommended calendar for 2011-2012 as presented.
Blair.
Are the in-service days, are those the collaboration opportunities?
Some of them are, and then some of them are dedicated to, some are, staff development, some are PLCs, different, there's a variety.
So how many PLC days do we now have?
We typically do those 4 half-days, and then some of their full days, they'll bring some PLC elements into it. Depends on where they are in the process of developing the PLC team.
But we attend 180 days, there's, 200-day calendar,
Teachers have to.
there are a certain number of days teachers have to do professional development, certain,
5 inserts.
I used to know all that too, but I can't remember it all.
5 discretion. It's 180 student, 10 vacations, 5 discretionary, and 5 inserts. I think that's 200.
Well, I'm pleased that we're so successful because I know about 2 or 3 ladies that run Mother's Day out, and when we close down for that, send those students home for those half days, I always hear about it. So I'm really glad we're successful with those collaboration days.
Any other questions?
Student discipline appeal, the board has been requested to review the March 29th, 2010 decision of the disciplinary hearing authority to uphold the expulsion of a student from Oakland High School. The student was expelled for 1 calendar year under the board's zero tolerance policy for assaulting a teacher. This review is pursuant to the provisions of policy 6.317. Policy states that the board shall review the record and shall affirm the decision of the DHA, overturn the decision of the DHA, modify the decision of the DHA to a lesser penalty, except in cases of zero tolerance violations. 4, grant a second hearing, which will be before the board, or 5, deny a request for a board hearing.
Questions? That, you all each have that packet. Go ahead, Mr. Gill, 16.
16, the 2010-2011 general purpose school budget working draft. You should have a copy of 2 documents that we provided you. And our plan is to give this to you, to give you time to look it over and start formulating questions you might have. And on Monday, April the 19th, which is coming Monday, have a special call meeting at 5 o'clock to have our first budget meeting. Yes, sir.
Just curious, without a calculator, what's that increase there?
13 million.
No, I mean percentage.
Percentage increase.
Percentage in dollars, 5%. In staff positions, 3.1%.
That's with new schools, right?
Yes.
I think our retirement contribution is going up 3.1 million or something.
Yes, sir.
That's where a big portion of that's coming from.
Questions?
General discussion.
All right, we're at general discussion. Anybody have any generals to discuss? I liked him too. He's adjourned. See you Thursday.